Turning our focus to France's waning influence in Africa. With each passing day, Paris's relations with its former colonies and allies in the continent are plummeting. Almost every other day, the former colonial power is coming under fire from African nations for either its actions or statements from officials. The latest one to hit out at France is the West African country Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso's junta chief, Ibrahim Traoré, has said that the French President Emmanuel Macron has insulted all Africans. At a ceremony in the capital on Monday, Traoré, who was recently at the center of a controversy in Ghana, hit out at the recent remarks made by the French President on Africa last week.
He also insulted all Africans in his remarks. There was one part that caught my attention, where he spoke of ingratitude. And that ingratitude is a disease that cannot be transmitted to humans. He is human. Our ingratitude is not transmissible to him. This is how this gentleman sees Africa, sees Africans. We are not human in his eyes.
Traoré, who has been in power since 2022, has also accused Paris of reorganizing so that it could remain in the African countries that have driven out the French troops. Now, Burkina Faso junta leader also called on all African nations to break their military cooperation agreements with France.
They won't leave certain countries. They've just dissolved the devices. You won't see them in the bases, but in the embassies, they'll be there. They're going to set up security companies to protect their companies in those countries. But the soldiers will be there, but you won't see them in uniform or gathered in bases. That's all it means. They'll reorganize, but they'll be there.
Now, the junta chief's remarks were coming after Macron called some African leaders ungrateful at a foreign policy conference last week. Macron said that he was still waiting for the Sahel nations to thank France for stopping them from falling into the hands of Islamist militants, and further went on to dismiss suggestions that his country had been forced out of the Sahel region.
We had a secure relationship. In truth, it was of two kinds. One part was our commitment to fighting terrorism since 2013. We were right. I think some have forgotten to say thank you, but that's okay. It'll come in time. I'm in a good position to know that ingratitude is a disease that cannot be transmitted to humans. But I say this for all the African governments who have not had the courage, in the eyes of their public opinion, to bear it. None of them would be in a sovereign country today if the French army had not been deployed in this region.
Macron's comments have led to an uproar in Africa. Many of the French president's remarks were seen as echoing colonial rhetoric. African nations called these comments an insult to Africa, and Chad was among the first Sahel nation to do so last week. It asked Paris to learn how to respect Africans. Now, the country's president, Mohamed Idriss Déby Itno, even said that Macron was living in the wrong era.
I'd like to express my outrage regarding recent remarks by President Macron, which border on contempt for Africa and Africans. I think he is in the wrong era.
Criticism of Macron's remarks also came from Senegal. The West African country's Prime Minister, Ousmane Sonko, lashed out at Macron, saying that France had neither the capacity nor the legitimacy to ensure Africa's security and sovereignty. Now, France has been facing major setbacks in Africa. African nations have often accused Paris of neo-colonial inclinations, and around 70% of the continent has already kicked out France and its troops that were stationed to fight the jihadist insurgency. It began with the military governments in West Africa. Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger were the first ones to cut ties with France and turn toward Russia. This was followed by Chad, which was France's key partner in the Sahel region. The country abruptly ended key defense and security agreements with Paris last year. Then Senegal and the Ivory Coast joined the France Out chorus and asked Paris to vacate military bases on their territory. Currently, France has troops stationed only in Djibouti and Gabon. France has also been engaged in a diplomatic row with Algeria, The dispute has stemmed from Paris's support for Morocco's claims over the Western Sahara region. The support to Morocco prompted Algeria to recall its ambassador from Paris last year. So, as African countries sharpen their criticism of France and Paris loses key allies in the continent, will Macron be able to win back the trust of the Francophone Africa? Or is this the end of friendly relations between the European power and its former colonies?